Thank you very much indeed, and good morning, everybody. What a pleasure to see everyone here, to hear that we have at least 31 countries represented, probably more than that. We will hear from 31 countries. And as Patrick's social experiment earlier showed, only a handful of us have had the privilege to attend the series of conferences. Now, that's actually good news because it means that we're widening the circle. Every time we meet, we're bringing in new people, spreading the word, growing that group of messengers that Lindiwe has just been talking about. But I've been asked to speak today because I'm one of that small handful who's had the privilege of being at all three conferences. And so I've been asked today to give the perspective of where we've come from, where we are right now, and where we'd like to go to moving forward from Johannesburg. So first of all, where are we right now? And this is talking about December 2013. How climate smart are we in the world? Now, what we'd like to achieve with climate smart agriculture is this congruence between adaptation, food and nutrition security, and mitigation actions. And so ideally, we would like to reach this sweet spot somewhere in this diagram over the Arabian Sea, where we achieve all of these together. Now, of course, for many countries, they will be wanting to stress adaptation and food and nutrition security outcomes, and that's going to be the emphasis. And for other countries, it will be looking at much more at the kind of mitigation side of the agenda. And sorry, I'm lost for a second. So I've had a total freeze. Excuse me. So what I'd like to do now is to look at where we are in each of those agendas, to look at how well we are doing at the moment. So moving first of all to adaptation. In 2011, we had global finance of $364 billion US. Now that sounds immense. It means we've had $1 billion US for every single day of the year to spend on climate change and on moving forward on climate change. But only 16 billion of that, about 5%, went on adaptation. And in particular, for agriculture, land use, and for forestry, we had only 4 billion, another smaller slice of that. This means that we have a major deficit. If we actually look at what the potential costs are for adaptation in agriculture, IFPRI has put the figure at about 12 billion a year. The UNFCCC has put it at 12 billion a year. And more recently, UNEP has released a report where they've looked at the adaptation in Africa and specifically, and they've said it's about $4 billion a year. So we have this immense adaptation gap to fill, and this is a gap that means that it's not only in Africa, it's also right across Asia, right across Europe, where we're seeing that adaptation deficit. Importantly also, most of that adaptation finance we're seeing it in the public sector. A huge proportion of mitigation finance is private. In adaptation, there may be actions that are not yet being labelled as adaptation. They may be labelled as securing the future food supply, the future supply chain. But nonetheless, we really need to enhance that private sector contribution as well. Moving on now to mitigation. For anyone who was at Warsaw, they know that it wasn't particularly good news. Japan used the meeting as an occasion to announce that they will not be meeting their second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. That means that this red triangle here, only 15% of global emissions are now covered under the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. As several speakers have mentioned, agriculture remains sidelined from the negotiations. This isn't just agriculture in terms of mitigation. This is agriculture in terms of both mitigation and adaptation. We continue to struggle to get it onto the agenda. Finally, in terms of food security and nutrition security, it's no mistake that that circle is falling off the slide here. While we've made superb progress on some of the Millennium Development Goals, for example, the number of girls in junior school, we have not done nearly as well as on MDG 1, on food and nutrition security. We're continuing to see the very high levels of hunger around the world. So I give you here, this is a scalable cartogram. You may be familiar with this kind of format, and it's where countries are sized towards a particular variable. And in this case, that variable is the number of McDonald's outlets. And I'm using this example not to either celebrate or criticize fast food, but simply because we have so few data sets about food availability. And this one makes one point very clear, that while global food production globally really matters to secure our food security in 2020, 2030, 2050 and beyond, the distribution of that food is not equal. And some consumers in some countries have got in particular much higher access to globally traded food and to global retail than others. For example, Africa would barely be visible in this diagram if it was not for South Africa at the very tip there. And the outcomes of this are severe, and again, they're globally shared. There are many, many measures of the outcomes of food insecurity. A diagram of vitamin A deficiency would look very different, or of childhood wasting and stunting would look very different. But this one here is actually deaths due to starvation. And as you can see, no country is left untouched. So these data, in fact, are from 2002. You will see Zimbabwe is a big red triangle there. 2002 was a very tough year for Zimbabwe. But nonetheless, other agricultural powerhouses around the world, South Africa, Brazil, the United States, actually saw a greater number of deaths from starvation during those years. The issue is that we have a huge shared global problem. The risks may be different for different countries, but everywhere is facing these challenges. So given that, I've painted a depressing picture: huge shared problems, differential risks, food systems which are both connected but also very disconnected, and no global agreement as we all meet here together now. So what can we do? So one source of optimism comes from a well-known economist, Professor Elinor Ostrom. She's dedicated her entire career to looking at when do people come together to work together for the global or for the communal good, rather than for immediate short-term self-interest. And she's been rewarded with a Nobel Prize for the excellence of her work. In a paper that she's releasing early in the new year, it's currently available online, she argues that we simply do not have time to wait for global agreement on climate change. We need to act now, and we need to act at all levels and at all centres. And in this paper, she goes on to talk about the many ways in which that action is happening at all levels already all over the world. So it could be at community level, across landscapes, or in municipalities and in cities. And she brings together the examples of why people do this. And often we're motivated not to act for that global good, but our motivations very much are around the benefits that happen at community level. It might be cleaner air, it might be lower fuel bills, it might be better food. And I would argue that the perspective that Professor Ostrom is advocating there is one that we agriculturalists have already taken. We have already been smart in this sense. We've been working at many centres and at many levels of action. And this is shown by the pathway that has brought us here now. So just to pull out some key words, The Hague was about a roadmap, Hanoi was about a communique, and here in Johannesburg, we have the opportunity to discuss an alliance and perhaps embark on the design phase of such an alliance, if we agree on it. So in The Hague, the roadmap was not so much an idealistic planning roadmap. It was very much a bottom-up roadmap of mapping what is happening now already and what was planned in the near future. And a huge number, 56 different countries reported on what they were doing. And in particular, the adaptation deficit in Africa was a big theme of the meeting, and I'm very proud to say that 20 African countries reported on what they were doing. So the gap then is not the will to act, it's not the desire, it's not the impetus at national level, it's the support to that. Of course, many countries marked in grey on this map are also doing actions at enormous and accelerating pace. These were not reported at The Hague, but will be part of the momentum going forward. Moving on to Hanoi, a communique was put out that tried to express in 6 key areas the themes behind which we need to rally to take climate-smart agriculture forward. The best way perhaps to illustrate these and the enormous richness that lies behind these headline areas is just to use one example. And I'm going to select one from the host country itself, from Vietnam. I think it's important for us all to remember that climate-smart agriculture is about livestock and fisheries as well as about crops. But in fact, I'm going to use a cropping system example here. So in about 2005, the Irrigated Rice Research Consortium got together to try and work out ways to save on water in rice irrigation, working very much in the principles of Hanoi, a farmer-led research agenda and involving multiple partners in this consortium. And the wonderful thing about the system that they came up with of periodically draining rice fields is that it also delivers great benefits to saving money and therefore improving incomes of farmers, and also, interestingly, to mitigating the methane emissions from rice fields. So this research is continuing, it's scaling up, farmers are at the centre of it, and scientists such as Nguyen Thi Lang, who you see in the corner there, are also doing participatory development and testing with farmers of salinity-tolerant rice varietals as saline intrusion becomes more and more of a risk to Vietnamese rice systems. This has now developed into policy support. The central government policy specifies alternate wetting and drying as best practice throughout Vietnam in a policy document released in 2012, and it's now been translated into action at provincial level across the country. And this document is one example of that. And as well as that, there is significant private sector involvement coming into this. I don't have an example from Vietnam, but for example in Bangladesh, this alternate wetting and drying system, the Hatim Group, which manufactures these piping kits, is providing farmers with very affordable systems with which to manage technically the wetting and drying of their rice fields. So this illustrates all of the set of components that need to come together. The other part, of course, is financing it and really getting that risk management right. And the IFAD ASAP program has also come in Vietnam and is looking at, first of all, supporting a flood early warning system to warn farmers about, first of all, increases in salinity and also in larger scale major flood events, which are an increasing problem under climate change in Vietnam. And also to look at, in those parts of Vietnam where the future of rice is seriously threatened, what the transformational alternatives might be, what it might mean to move out of rice, for example, into a different crop, such as coconuts, or into fisheries. So what's the transferable lesson from Hanoi and from the Vietnam example I've just given to you? I think the point here is that many partners are involved. I've only named a handful of them. There have been many other UN agencies, FAO, many governmental departments in Vietnam, and so on involved. And also there are multiple ingredients. I think it's very important that these examples, they haven't just got the technology right. They've been water smart, they've been policy smart, they've been risk smart, they've been information smart. They've really drawn all of these different components together. But in doing that, they've done it around one very simple story, one simple agenda, one simple goal. In this case, it's about reducing the risks and costs to rice production. And I think that's what I'd like to call us to do at this meeting. We've seen that there's this huge adaptation deficit. We need the political support. We need the business support. We need to fill that finance gap. And in order to attract that interest, we need to communicate simple stories, even while understanding all of the complexity behind that. And that's where I'd like to leave you with. With this wordle, this is our purpose here at the meeting today. It's captured here. We hope very much that the discussion will share knowledge once again, will also focus potentially on building this alliance, which will be a lift-off from agenda setting at the global level to action. Thank you.
You say you did have somebody, you did talk. You say you